Hi, I'm John Allen, the editor of Crux. Welcome to another video feature here on the Crux YouTube channel. This one is brought to us by the Capuchin Franciscan province of St. Joseph, which is headquartered in Detroit. It spans much of the upper Midwest and north of the country. And we are delighted today to be joined by a Capuchin brother who just in August made his final vows to the order. So he's still kind of wet behind the ears in the Capuchin world, but full of enthusiasm. The Assistant Vocations Director for the province of St. Joseph, Brother Jason Graves. Brother, how are you today?
Good morning, John. I'm doing very well, thank you.
Now, I don't know if you know this, brother, but I have deep Capuchin roots. Okay, I grew up on the high plains of western Kansas. All of my initial formation in the faith was through Capuchins. The priest who gave me first communion, my first confession, all of that was a Capuchin. I went to Capuchin schools all the way through high school, graduating from Thomas More Prep Marion, actually, in the long ago year of 1983. And I've remained friends with many Capuchins throughout the years. And I think this, brother, if there is no other argument for the saintliness of the Capuchin order, now there are many other arguments, but I think one of the best in that mix is the fact that they have put up with me for all these years. So, you know, all I can say, I'm using you here as a proxy for Capuchins everywhere. Thank you for your patience.
Well, absolutely. Capuchins are known for their patience, but I'm sure that we're very happy to have played a role in your formation and for some of the work that you've been doing. You know, you're out there doing the good work.
Some of the guys who actually knew me exactly how happy they are to be tagged with the responsibility for that. But in any event, we're not here to talk about me. We're here to talk about the Capuchins, and in particular, a huge moment for the Capuchin order, really all over the world, but certainly here in the United States. Coming up on November 18th at Ford Field in Detroit, when Solanus Casey, Father Solanus Casey, is going to be beatified by Detroit's Archbishop Alan Vigneron. Of course, Cardinal Angelo Amato of the Vatican's Congregation for the Causes of Saints will be on hand. Now, I know for all people with connections to the Capuchins everywhere, this is a huge moment. But it's especially important for you, isn't it? Because Solanus Casey actually played a role in sort of awakening your own sense of attraction to religious life.
Absolutely. I grew up in Hazel Park, Michigan, which is right on the 8-mile border of Detroit. So growing up, and I also grew up in a Capuchin parish, so they've also got to take some credit from me there too. But I grew up knowing about Father Solanus and the work that the Capuchins did. We would take church outings and mission trips down to the Solanus Casey Center. So I grew up constantly hearing about this Solanus guy, or as he's often talked about in Detroit, Solinus, you know, one of those local pronunciations. But I grew up hearing about him and just the simple, humble person that he was. And that was very inspiring to me.
And then as you got to know the figure of Father Solanus, brother, what other aspects of his personality, his life, and so on, sort of helped solidify your sense that this was the life to which you were called?
Well, you know, I've often heard it said that we're all meant to aspire for sainthood. But for me, a lot of the saints, I have trouble identifying myself with. I don't know that I will ever have the vast intellect or theological prowess of, say, a Bonaventure. I don't know that, even though I might aspire to it, I don't know if I'll ever have the humility and the devotion and the faith of a Mother Teresa. But when I looked at the figure of Solanus, you know, somebody who from very early in his Capuchin life, people thought that he was unintelligent. He was ordained a simplex priest because he struggled with his studies and the language barrier that was there. You know, this was somebody that they really didn't know what to do with. When you look at Solanus in his early years, he's very approachable. He's very relatable. He's almost, for me, somebody who I can relate to far more easily because I don't need to say that I'm reaching for some very high pedestal. Solanus is someone who's very approachable, somebody who is on level with the people, and which is what made him such a fantastic counselor and someone that people could confide in because he never placed himself above others. He made himself very approachable. And whether that was natural or intentional.
I mean, do you think, I mean, he kind of strikes me as the quintessential Capuchin saint in that, you know, most of the Capuchins I have known over the years, even though many of them are actually extraordinarily talented and very special people, you know, don't comport themselves that way. I mean, there's not a lot of flash or sizzle about most Capuchins. They just sort of quietly and very humbly, you know, go about trying to do the work of God, and in particular, you know, go about trying to stand with ordinary people and be there for them. And so in that sense, the fact that at one level there was nothing particularly special or distinguishing about Solanus is precisely what makes him so uniquely Capuchin, right?
Yeah, it's a beautiful irony when you think about it, is the fact that he never set himself up as being someone who was greater than or holier than or better than. That, in a sense, is what made him so unique. And I think that is quite typical of at least many of the Capuchins that I've met. They are very intelligent, very talented, but also very humble people. And I think that that is certainly the charm of Father Solanus.
Yeah, I mean, there's really nothing self-promotional, right, about the Capuchin ethos. Now, let me ask you this. Here's a comparison I have made, which has gotten me in trouble sometimes with some of your Capuchin confreres. I have written that there is a sense in which Father Solanus is the Padre Pio of the United States, in that the kind of, you know, most famous Capuchin saint of a place.
Mm-hmm.
Now I know that it's apples and oranges, right? Because, you know, with Solanus, there wasn't the spectacular element of the supernatural most of the time. There wasn't the stigmata or, you know, the perfume of sanctity or the rumors about bilocation and, you know, miraculously, you know, intervening with Allied pilots during World War II and things like that. But I think the common term is that both, you know, in Italy, if you are an ordinary Catholic, right, you're a blue collar in the trenches, workaday Catholic, and you run into some problem in your life, right? Like you're sick, or your son is sick, or, you know, there's been a tragedy with somebody you really love. I mean, in other words, if you're suffering, if you're going through a hard time, Padre Pio is that saint that those ordinary Catholics feel is their guy, because he, you know, he was a man of the people. He was, in many ways, very simple himself, and he exuded compassion for suffering. And allowing for the significant cultural differences, it seems to me that Solanus has kind of that same profile here, as you say, a very simple, in some ways, very simple, ordinary guy whose profile was somebody who didn't move in VIP circles or wasn't interested in high society. He was very much a man of the ordinary people, particularly those who were suffering, and that he always had an open heart for people who were going through a hard time. And would you agree there is at least something to that comparison?
Oh, I absolutely would agree. You know, I think when I look at Pio and Solanus, they both used the gifts that God gave them to their absolute fullest potential. You know, whereas Padre Pio was a dynamic presence who just could fill a room. Even if you read some of the accounts of his final mass, you know, his body was failing him so greatly, and yet, you know, all eyes are on him, and there's mobs outside just waiting to see him. Whereas with Solanus, was incredibly dynamic, but in a different way. You know, brothers that know him say he was soft spoken, he had a relatively corny sense of humor, you know, that he was a more of a quiet presence. But when you were with him, he certainly filled a room, but in a different way.
Yeah, and also I think that idea of just compassion for the suffering, right? That
Absolutely.
if your heart is aching, right? These are two people that I think, just ordinary mass-going meat and potatoes Catholics who aren't necessarily following complex church debates, right? I mean, who aren't reading a lot of Aquinas or Bonovich or Suarez, right?
Mhm.
But nevertheless, like for that ordinary Catholic, the connection to both of these guys to me seems extremely strong.
Absolutely. And I think that that shows through very well. There was a book shortly after Solanus's death where many of his letters were published. And when you read through the letters, you see that he has a very unique way of connecting with people in their suffering. And he finds some way to connect with them, to comfort them, to remind them of God's love for them, and to find ways that are just very effective. For somebody who was thought to not be overwhelmingly intelligent, at least academically, he had such an incredible emotional and human intelligence about him. He just got people and he knew what to say to people in order to help them in their times of need. And many of the letters that ended up coming back said something to the effect of, "You helped me get through a very difficult time, and I don't know what I would have done." I mean, there's so many testimonies of people being touched by that compassion.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, we have been speaking about Father Solanus Casey, who is set to be beatified on November 18th. But Brother Jason, I also know that in addition to this special attachment you feel to Solanus, you also have a very important role as part of the vocations ministry of the Capuchin province of St. Joseph. So let me ask you this. If you're talking to a young man who might be interested in a religious life, or, maybe the parents of a young man who might be interested in a religious life, and they ask you, all right, brother, can you just give me in a couple of sentences what it's all about? What's your answer to that question?
With Solanus, he was all about accompanying people. And I was very lucky that I had people to accompany me on my journey. I think as a vocation director, what I can offer to people is that Capuchins are trying to walk with others. We're trying to accompany them. We want to be able not to be ahead of somebody, not to be behind someone, but to walk right with them on their journey, wherever they're going, whatever's going on with them, and just to support them, to remind them that God loves them and that there are people that are here to help them. The Capuchins, I think what we do best is build relationships. For all of our many ministries and for our direct service to the poor, what all of these come down to is we're trying to build relationships. This is something Solanus was so good at, and it's what we try to continue to this day, is being in relationship with people, this sister brotherhood, this idea that we are all connected, and we try in our work to build relationships. I'd say that's the Capuchin's main ministry, is relationship building.
Well, I can testify from personal experience. You are exceptionally good at it. I mean, I will tell you this, some of the people I consider to be my closest friends in the world and people I count on more than anything else when I'm experiencing some kind of spiritual struggle or I need some guidance, would be Capuchins who took an interest in me when I was in junior high or high school, and we've maintained those relationships over the years. And so what you say about this Capuchin gift for building, and I think it's not just building relationships, but sustaining them, right? Because the thing I have noticed about these Capuchins is that once you enter their circle of concern, you're there for the rest of your life. This is not some transient thing.
Oh yeah, that's certainly true. When we look at some of Solanus's letters, we see that there are some people that he met. They weren't family members, they weren't personal acquaintances or friends that he had met, but they're people that had come to him one day at the monastery, and he's still corresponding with them 10 years later, 15 years later. And some of these relationships, they keep going. Certainly in Capuchin prayer life and in just the one-on-one relationships. We take those very seriously. And in many of our ministries, we come to know the people that we serve, and they become part of our Capuchin family in a way.
All right, Brother Jason, if somebody wants more information about vocations opportunities in the province of St. Joseph, where do they go?
The easiest way to find us is at our website, which is capuchinfranciscans.org. They could also get in touch with us on social media. We're on Facebook. If you just search for the Capuchin Province of St. Joseph, you'll find us, along with a lot of our ministries as well.
Excellent. Well, listen, I hope that as we get closer to the beatification of Solanus on the 18th, maybe we can talk to you again, perhaps in this venue. Maybe we can have you on our Catholic Channel radio show, but I think it would be great to have you help us unpack who this figure is and why it matters that he's being beatified. Would you be up for that?
Absolutely.
Great. All right, we have been speaking to Capuchin Brother Jason Graves. He is the Assistant Vocations Director for the Capuchin Province of St. Joseph. Just took his final vows in August, and still, as you can detect, full of beans, full of passion about the vocational life. Do follow up with the web addresses that Brother Jason just gave you in terms of more information about vocations opportunities with the Capuchins. All I can tell you is that 30, 40 years of experience with these guys tells me these are some of the nicest, kindest, simplest, humblest, and yet, remarkably smart and creative guys you were ever going to hang out with. So it would be well worth your time. Thank you for joining us for this special video feature on the Crux YouTube channel. Stay with us for more. But until then, I'm John Allen, and you have a great day.